I'm recording this right after my review. Today I'm talking about all the differences from the Heartstopper books and the Heartstopper movie. I've done videos for this topic on all 3 seasons, so I think it's good to enter the movie, because obviously I knew there was going to be some differences, and, well, there was quite a lot, actually. I was quite surprised, because I had to watch the movie again yesterday, and read the book at the same time, and I kind of watched and read them simultaneously to see all the differences. I paused it throughout so I could take my notes. But yeah, let's get into it. Alright, first of all, I'm not talking about all the scenes that were cut, alright? Because there was a lot of scenes that were cut, and the video will just be too long if I discuss every one of them individually. So they're all just getting lumped in on their own segment. So yeah, that's that mentioned, right? You don't have to comment if I missed any of the scenes that were cut, because I'm not talking about all of them. But yeah, let's get it properly into it. Okay, so the first difference is that Harry is one of the candidates for head boy, when he wasn't in the books at all. Is he even allowed to be head boy? Because he's the year above Charlie, so he'd be leaving the next year anyway. But yeah, I kind of like that. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's cool to have him be like the a candidate for head boy, because he's still up himself anyway. And there's also, like, a difference where he shows he's still kind of homophobic, because after Charlie wins, he's like, you didn't even talk about anything important. Charlie talked about homophobia. So, yeah, Harry's still a dick. Also, the party they go to afterwards is no longer a Halloween party. It's now just a normal party, and I don't even know whose house. It's still, like, the same, like, kind of. Obviously, it was kind of cut down, but yeah. And also, in the book, Nick and Charlie have sex in the bathroom, but here they leave the party, go to the beach, and then have sex, which, bit weird, not gonna lie, that you do that outside, but I'm not really gonna judge you on that, because, I mean, you can do whatever you want as long as you're both consenting. So even though Isaac was made for the show specifically anyway, I'm still counting this. There's a little talk he has with, Tori, like, Tori's talking to him at the party, and I think they're talking about being asexual, because, spoilers, Tori's asexual. I didn't mention that in the review, because I was going to mention it here. So it's like it's kind of foreshadowing, because she's obviously asking him about it, but we don't know that yet. So I think that was quite a nice detail. I like that. The, like, kind of, like, not opening, but the scene after the opening scene is a bit different as well, because instead of it being, Nick and Charlie being late, almost being late for school, it's Nick waking up in his bed alone after his birthday, and Charlie's outside playing with Nellie and Henry, which I'm pretty sure did not happen in the books. It might happen in Volume 5, maybe. I don't actually quite remember, but it's still different either way, so I'm still counting it. Also, this one I definitely know. This is where Nick tells Charlie that he's going to Leeds, because he tells him that way before the events of, like, Volume 6. Like, at the end of Volume 5, that's when he tells him. But he didn't tell him that at the end of Season 3, I noticed, which I thought was weird. So, yeah, I was wondering when he would tell him, and he told him here, so that's fine. Also, Darcy doesn't work at the cafe with Charlie in this, because their arc is already complete, because Alice clearly only read it that way in the books, because, like, they were tying in Darcy's arc with their movie counterpart. So, you know, because Darcy's arc was already finished in the show first, and they had already come out as non-binary, there was no need to have all that. So that's why they didn't work at the cafe here, which I kind of like. That's a fine change. This is a very small change, but Charlie actually recommends Nick that he should volunteer much earlier here than he does in the books. Like, he only suggests that, like, I think after the argument and after Nick gets hurt, but here it's here. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with Charlie suggesting that to him, but yeah, I do find it a little small interesting change. Also, Charlie also asked Nick if he's okay and doing okay, like, much sooner here as well. And we also see the flashback to Nick's dad much sooner here as well. It's actually only the one. In the books, we see a couple of flashbacks throughout, like, Nick's story, but yeah, we see it a lot sooner here, and only the one as well, but I assume those were the scenes that were cut out, so. So when they get to the pub, it's mostly the same, even to when Nick getting, wasted, but the only difference is that David shows up at the pub as well, and he's the one that drives Nick and Charlie home, rather than Tara and Darcy, because, again, Darcy's arc is already finished, so you couldn't have Tara driving them home, so yeah, we have David driving them home instead, which actually does make a little bit more sense, I'm not gonna lie. Although, considering, I don't know what the limit is, because I never once drunk alcohol, so I don't know what the limit is to driving and drinking, so I don't know if, like, that was legal, to be fair, but I don't think David really cares at all. Also, this one I actually didn't really like, to be honest. I think this was an unnecessary change. Maybe Netflix told Alice not to have this, but, when Nick's doing the rugby match, the other player that he fights with doesn't call him the F slur, it's kind of not even Nick's fault because Nick tackles him, then the other player pushes him still, and then Nick pushes him back, and then that's when the other player punches him in the face, and then that's when his eyebrow bleeds. Which, like, I don't know, I feel like I would have preferred if, like, you kept it the same as the books there, because it shows that Nick's mental health is still declining because he got angry and punched someone, but it's also a callback to when Haru called Charlie the F-slur as well, so yeah, that's a change I didn't really like. Also, Nick and his mum's talk that they have, kind of the same, it kind of has the same message, but it's a little bit different. Like, it happens in the kitchen, first of all. They also, like, have two talks, because one's about, Nick hitting the person and, like, feeling like he's not a good boyfriend. And then the second talk, kind of ripped from the novella, to be fair, is, like, Nick saying how he's ruined the only good thing in his life, and then how Nick's mum says how, like, how she learned from her mistakes of his dad, but then Nick can still learn from his mistakes here and, like, make amends with Charlie. So, kind of different here, still, but yeah. Okay, so the tent scene, right, is different because Charlie's the one that gives Nick his disposable camera, whereas in the novella, Nick bought it so he could take photos to remember the school and all of his friends and that. So, I think that's an interesting change. I kind of like that as a present from Charlie this time. And also, we get to hear what Nick's nightmare was. It was because Nick's worried about Charlie relapsing about him. Like, that's the whole, like, even in the books, that's the whole, like, his arc. So, he tells him that in the dream, he missed all the signs of him relapsing and Charlie died. So, yeah. We didn't get to hear what the dream was last time. We knew it was of Charlie dying, but we didn't know how. So, I like that change as well. So, yeah, the tent scene was a little bit different, but everything else was still the exact same. Also, this change I understand, but it kind of misses the point. So in the graphic novel, when Charlie's LGBT club gets rejected, it's Mr. Farouk that tells him he should still do it and use his classroom. But in the movie, it's Mr. Ajayi that tells him, and I guess it makes more sense since Charlie goes to Mr. Ajayi's classroom in the show, like to hide from bullies and that. But I don't know, it kind of like misses the point of Mr. Farouk's arc. He still goes to the club, and this is when he like comes out to like Tao, Charlie, and Isaac and Nick, and everyone still shows up except for James. But I'll get there. So yeah, I do like it. It makes sense still, but I would have preferred it was still Mr. Farouk's idea. Yeah, it's such a tiny, insignificant change, but James seems to have moved schools because in the graphic novels he comes to the LGBT club, but in in the movie, they like see him at Pride, spoilers, and they act like they haven't seen him in ages. And then he like says, "It's good to see you, bye." So he's obviously like moved school, so that's understandable. So this one I actually find quite funny. I'm not gonna lie. So when Nick volunteers at the dog shelter, the receptionist is really rude to him. They weren't rude to him in the book, so Alice has obviously like developed him a little bit more, which I find hilarious. We also get another scene of them together, which we didn't get. Of him like saying to Nick, like, because he thinks Nick's dating a girl, but then Nick, tells him that he's dating a boy, and then he's like, "I didn't realize you were gay. I'm not part of the woke generation." He actually said that, and then Nick says his iconic line, "I'm bi, actually," and then they kind of talk about, Charlie, blah blah blah, and then he like says to Nick, "Well, you're good at picking up dog shit, and the world would fall apart if people couldn't pick up dog shit." You are so rude. Oh my god. So that was quite funny, actually. It wasn't funny that he was rude to Nick. It's just funny that they added that. Also, Nick is late to their 2 year anniversary picnic when he wasn't in the books. I think they left together for their 2 year anniversary. So I actually like that change as well because it kind of shows that they're not drifting apart per se, but they feel like they are. So I like that. And Charlie did wait the whole time, but then, Nick saw that he was freezing, and Charlie didn't even eat any of the food as well, which was, obviously. That's still the same, though, so I'm not going to mention that. Also, Nick and David's talk happens a little differently, because at their mom's birthday, he still says that their dad is a bad dad, because he's finally coming to terms with that. And then, he still says his line to Nick, you got villains and heroes, that's how your mindset works. And then after that, they don't have their talk like they do in the books because it actually happens after Nick and Charlie break up. Speaking of which, so when Nick and Charlie break up at Harry's party, it's actually the opposite to how it happens in the novella. Because in the novella, Nick's the one who thinks everything's going to be fine, and Charlie's the one who is like, I don't want him to go to university. And then he gets drunk and avoids Nick and then embarrasses Nick. And then that's when he like starts yelling out, "You could just break up with me if you want." And then that's when they like break up for a while. So that's why Alice has made it not canon, because, that Charlie doesn't really fit in with the main Charlie anymore at all. That is not what our Charlie would do. So, yeah. But anyway, Charlie doesn't get drunk in the movie. Neither does Nick, obviously, because he drives home. But they still hear people talk about university and talk about how things might be hard for everyone being long distance and that, which still gets in their head. And Charlie's more upset that Nick it won't open up to him and won't open up to him when he's at university, obviously. So it's not the fact that Nick's leaving he's upset about, it's the fact that Nick is keeping his feelings in. But then Nick is the one that actually instigates the breakup here. He doesn't in the books, like I said, but he's the one that thinks that Charlie would be better off without him, and then he even says to Charlie that he's only happy when he's around. And then Charlie even says to Nick, it shouldn't be that way. So then that's when they break up. It was actually Nick that instigated it. So, yeah, it was quite the opposite than it happened in the novella, but I think it makes more sense, not gonna lie. It makes way more sense with these characters than the novella does. But do keep in mind the novella was written before the graphic novels, so Alice hadn't really come up with their personalities properly at that point. So it still kind of makes sense why it would be like that, but yeah, it's definitely a lot better here. Also, I do still want to quickly mention, while they still break up like they do in the novella, Tao and Elle kind of put their breakup on hold to support Charlie, which is also a difference because the friends do support Charlie in the novella, obviously, but they don't like sleep over at his house to make sure he's okay, obviously. Like, so yeah, that's still a little bit different, but it's still basically the same. So there's obviously mostly the same when the aftermath of the breakup. There's a couple of differences though. Like, Charlie starts spiraling and he stops eating, and his parents try and get him to eat, but he just refuses. He starts talking to Jeff again, and then he starts thinking of, the thing again that I don't want to say. So that was really dark. He doesn't let himself do it though, because it's been 1 year since he's done it, but he does get the urge, and he tries this exercise where he names all the things in the room that he sees, so to get his mind off of it, but he keeps seeing the photo of him and Nick, so yeah. But Nick also starts taking all the photos of him and Charlie off of his wall as well, which I didn't expect. And like I said, this is when him and David have their talk, because David, is talking about the breakup, and then he's saying, how he doesn't see their dad as good. He still moves to Paris to work with their dad, though. But, yeah. Although they did call out the line, I know I wasn't going to say I was going to tell about this stuff, but they called out the line where Nick said it didn't have to be this way between us, and they should have left that in at least. That was nice. Well, they're both still depressed like they were in the novella, of course, because they literally broke up, so yeah, that's still the same. I said I was going to talk about it more. This is the most important change from the books, in my opinion, and I don't care what anyone says. So, the moment when Elle talks to Charlie about why pride is important and why she wants him there is gut-wrenching. It actually ripped my fucking heart out, oh my god. They did not hold back. Elle's just full on, if... trans people are banned from bathrooms. If I was any younger, I wouldn't be allowed to take hormones legally. Everyone doesn't want me to exist. Are you really doing that right now? God. Sorry, I might tear up a little. So yeah. And also, Elle's literally on a float shouting, what do we want? Trans rights, when do we want them now? That just hit me so hard, I'm sorry. So yeah. That was a big change that I really love. That's my favourite change from the books, because they didn't really talk about Elle being trans that much in the books, or even in season 1 and 2. It wasn't until season 3 when they really started, diving into that stuff, which I'm really glad about, and thank you, Netflix, for allowing that, because a lot of companies would have cut that out. Okay, when they go to Pride, though, the biggest difference, obviously, is that Nick and Charlie don't go together because they're broken up at this point. Because they do go together in the books, and it's actually really nice. And Nick is talking to one of Imogen's queer friends. I think they tried to date her and Imogen, but it didn't really work out. And Charlie sees that and, misunderstands it and thinks that Nick's moved on with a girl. Obviously. I feel like any teenager would think that. So, yeah, that was quite sad as well. And then that's when Charlie almost, again... But yeah, I don't really know much else to say, because that's kind of that's what's different here. Well, it does still serve the same purpose. The scene when Charlie sees the old gay couple at the cafe happens here rather than earlier on, like it does in the books. He still offers them the cake. They still say, "Sorry, we're diabetic, we can't eat it," But it's to show Charlie that in both of the canons, the books and the show and the movie, it's to show Charlie that relationships can last forever. But I think it's more important to have it here, because this is what inspires Charlie to try and reach out to Nick again. And also is what inspires him to eat, because he eats the cake, obviously. Like he does in the book as well, but I think it was more impactful here. Also, it's Charlie that finds Nick's camera under his bed, whereas in the book, it was Tori that found it wedged in their couch. And Charlie still gets the photos printed out and sends them to Nick, but In the novella, he only sent the one photo and he wrote a note on the back. But here, he sends all the photos and he sends all the notes on like separate pieces of paper for some reason. Why not just write it all in the one? So yeah, that's very different as well. But it's still the same premise. And also, actually no, I'll get to that in a bit. Also, this is when, like I said earlier, that Nick still feels like that if he wasn't perfect, Charlie would leave him. And that's kind of the same, but this is where he like talks about that rather than earlier on like he did in the books. And in the novella at this point, he thinks that like Charlie just broke up with him just because he couldn't handle being far apart. So still very different. The long distance isn't the problem in the movie, which I really love. The problem is that they think that they're not good enough for each other, which I think is really more powerful in my opinion. Also, obviously, Nick doesn't go to Michael's ice skating competition. It's only Tori and Charlie this time. And this is also where Tori comes out as asexual to Charlie. She comes out on the Ferris wheel in Volume 5, but Alice cut that out because she had a plan for Tori in Season 4. But obviously that she never got to do that, so she had to like add that here, which is fair enough. And Tori and Michael basically still say the same thing about the relationship, how maybe it's not normal to everyone else, but if it works for them, it works for them. And that is what's important. Okay, so like I said, Charlie posts all the photos this time, but instead of Nick's mum finding them, it's actually Nick that finds them. And it's also, I forgot to write this in my script, I'm glad I remembered. Charlie tried to send Nick the photos through his phone, but they weren't showing up on Nick's phone because his phone's broken. So that's why he decides to send the photo. So that's another difference as well. I forgot to mention, and I'm really glad that I did. And Charlie also wrote on the letter to me at the beach rather than True in primary school because obviously Oliver's not Charlie's brother in this. He's his cousin, so he has no reason to go to the primary school. So yeah, I think that's a good difference as well. I prefer that they go to the beach rather than the school because that makes more sense. Also, when they make up, it's a little bit different because they don't like look for all their memories like they do in the book because obviously Nick just saw them all. They actually talk about how they feel like they're stronger than most teenage relationships and how they don't think that they'll end like other teenage relationships do. So that was really powerful as well. So I'm sorry, I just love the fact that Alice changed all of their breakup stuff because it just makes so much more sense in the movie than it does in the book. So yeah, I really love this moment too when they kiss well, they didn't actually kiss, they hugged at the beach and then everything else happens the same as it did in the novella. They're at the beach, obviously, and then they go home and, they do the boom booming. So yeah, I do enjoy that. Also, a little quick change as well. Charlie says that he thinks he can't help Nick the way that Nick helps him, but Nick says that he totally does. I don't think they ever said that in the graphic novels, so yeah. But Nick said that Charlie being able to talk about his feelings kind of helped him a little bit, even though he still finds it difficult. Obviously, that's kind of why he, didn't talk about his feelings of going to uni. But I'm glad that, he realized that he can talk to Charlie about anything. Okay, so the Leavers prom is mostly the same. Which, by the way, a lot of people don't understand why Nick's at the prom considering he's leaving school. It's a Leavers prom. So it's mostly the same, except when Nick and Charlie go to their room where they had their first kiss, the talk is a bit different, because they actually have their talk that they had in the novella after they had their makeup sex, instead of the talk they had in Volume 6, which I don't remember what it was, but I will put a picture of it somewhere so you can see it. They actually make a reference to the fact that the novella is not canon, though, which I find hilarious. But yeah, so Nick obviously says, he takes the photo of them like he does in the novella, except it's not a post-sex photo. And they still have their back and forth, like, can I make it my screensaver, blah, blah, blah. I'm only 18, is it weird that I love you more than anyone? And then Charlie says, I'm weird too. And then the rest is, the same. So yeah. Also, Nick's the one that talks to Tao after he and Elle break up instead of Charlie, which I think, even though Charlie still would have worked, I think it's perfect for Nick to do it as well, because it's kind of a tradition that Nick and Tao always sit together and talk, because I think their relationship is the most underrated one in the whole show. The fact they went from hating each other to being friends is beautiful. I'm sorry, but it is. Okay, the epilogue is mostly the same, but the only difference being that Isaac and Imogen are in it, obviously, because they were made specifically for the show, and Isaac's final arc is that he's writing a book, and Imogen's final arc is that she's now Sahar's fangirl or something. I don't actually know if they're together or not. I actually don't. I hope that gets confirmed somewhere, because that was a little tiny bit confusing, but otherwise, the epilogue's the exact same. And finally, probably the most important change of all, the one that completely changed everything, the one that had such a biggest impact on the entire Heartstopper franchise. Tori doesn't go to Truum like she does in the graphic novels. She stayed at Higgs. Okay, well, that was all the differences that I spotted in the books, in the movie. I almost said the show. So let me know what you thought. I might make a compilation of all these videos and make a big, massive one. That would be awesome, actually. And let me know if there's any differences you noticed that I didn't talk about, unless it's a scene that was cut. Because again, there's too many of those. And please like and subscribe, please. And I'll see you next time. Bye.